After a shocking disaster at a Chinese-built train station, Serbia has been plunged into turmoil. In today's program, we'll explore how this incident sparked one of the nation's biggest protest movements in decades. On March 13th, the streets of Belgrade erupted. More than 3,000 demonstrators faced off against security forces in violent clashes. Fireworks exploded overhead, turning the city center into a scene of chaos. Riot police moved in, firing tear gas in an attempt to push the crowds back. What began as a small student protest in Novi Sad soon grew into a nationwide movement. The spark? The collapse of Novi Sad's newly renovated train station last November, a project led by a Chinese construction firm. The tragedy claimed 16 lives and left a scar on the nation. Anger quickly spread as citizens voiced outrage over shoddy construction, widespread corruption, and a government unwilling to take responsibility. For 9 months, protests swept through Serbia, with violence leaving dozens injured and hundreds behind bars. Analysts suggested the timing wasn't coincidental, noting that the unrest intensified just as President Aleksandar Vučić prepared for a high-profile visit to China. Reports revealed that Xi Jinping had personally invited him to Beijing to attend the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Asia. Speaking in the northern town of Bostan, Vučić confirmed he would travel to China in early May. He even hinted that Vladimir Putin would be present, and rumors circulated that Donald Trump had also received an invitation. Memories resurfaced of Xi's pledge years earlier in Moscow to support Serbia on future infrastructure projects, evidence, critics say, of how closely Vučić's government is tied to Beijing. Chinese state media has long painted the relationship as an ironclad friendship, stronger than even China's bond with Pakistan. But on Serbia's streets, the mood is very different. Protesters demanded Vučić's resignation, and the rallies spread like wildfire online. While government-controlled outlets claimed the unrest was fueled by foreign interference to damage ties with China, ordinary Serbians insisted they were only demanding freedom and transparency, much like neighboring countries such as Poland and Romania. Some even suggested Serbia could one day back away from China's Belt and Road initiative. At the heart of the storm is the Novi Sad station, a crucial hub of the Hungary-Serbia Railway, a flagship project under Beijing's Belt and Road campaign in Central and Eastern Europe. Between 2022 and 2024, Chinese contractors, including China Railway International and China Communications Construction, led extensive renovations. The station officially reopened in 2024, but disaster struck just months later. On November 1st, a massive 48-meter concrete roof caved in, instantly killing 14 people, leaving 3 critically injured and trapping 2 women who later died after undergoing amputations. A 19-year-old man also lost his life to severe injuries. Train services collapsed, and the station became infamous as yet another Tofu-Dreg project stamped with the label "Made in China." The incident raised urgent questions about safety oversight, corruption, and the government's accountability in infrastructure development. What might have been written off as an accident instead unleashed deep frustration across the country. Students who first gathered for candlelight vigils in memory of the victims soon led larger demonstrations, which spread from Novi Sad to towns and cities nationwide. By May 2025, the movement had expanded into over 400 locations. Campuses became protest grounds as students demanded truth, justice, and a truly independent investigation. The protest wave shook Serbia's leadership to its core. On May 28th, Prime Minister Miloš Vučević stepped down, forcing his cabinet to dissolve. Yet this resignation did little to calm the public. The government's sluggish response to the Novi Sad disaster fueled anger, and demonstrators began pushing for early parliamentary elections to bring an end to Vučić's rule. Their demands soon grew broader: press freedom, a crackdown on corruption, and real democratic reforms. A month later, on June 28th, Vidovdan, Serbia's National Day, Belgrade witnessed an unprecedented uprising. Police said 36,000 people flooded the streets, but independent observers reported numbers closer to 140,000, making it the largest protest in the country's modern history. Unlike earlier marches, which had been peaceful, this one descended into violence. Riot police unleashed stun grenades and tear gas, while protesters hurled flares and fireworks back. Dozens were dragged away in mass arrests. Organizers had warned Vučić beforehand, call early elections by 9 p.m. or step down. But the president refused, denouncing the movement as a foreign-backed conspiracy. Analysts, however, warned that stonewalling public anger could only inflame the situation further. Andreas Tusa of Teneo noted that the longer Vučić stalled, the more volatile the unrest would become. Finally, under relentless student pressure, the government moved. On date, 11 high-ranking officials tied to the Novi Sad station collapse were arrested. Among them were the former Minister of Construction, Transport and Infrastructure, and the former head of Serbia's rail infrastructure company. The crackdown was meant to ease public fury, but it came too late. Reuters later revealed explosive details. 6 suspects were charged with collaborating with 2 Chinese giants, China Railway International and China Communications Construction. They were accused of issuing fraudulent invoices during the Novi Sad station renovation, draining Serbia's budget of more than $115 million, while the companies pocketed nearly $19 million in illegal profit. The case highlighted how Belt and Road projects were not only construction schemes, but also vehicles for corruption, exported directly from Beijing into Europe. Serbia, in fact, has long been a centerpiece of China's ambitions in the Balkans. With its communist past and historic ties to authoritarian regimes, Belgrade found Beijing to be a natural partner. After the collapse of Yugoslavia, Serbia emerged as an independent nation in 2006, refusing to align with the EU or NATO. Instead, it turned to Russia and China for support. Chinese state media even described Serbia as Beijing's most trusted ally in Europe, closer than Pakistan, calling the relationship stronger than steel. Since 2016, when Serbia became the first European nation to formally join the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese investment has poured in. Railways, highways, bridges, and even copper mines have been developed under Beijing's watch. While these projects created jobs and injected financing, they also sparked criticism over debt dependence, environmental harm, and harsh labor conditions. In 2023, Voice of America released a powerful documentary titled Powder Keg: China's Belt and Road in the Balkans. Director Samir Dzebo said the title symbolized both the region's history of instability and the hidden tensions behind China's involvement. The film exposed how opaque many of these deals were, particularly in Serbia and Montenegro. Analyst George, interviewed in the documentary, made the issue clear. The problem wasn't investment itself, but the secrecy behind it. What are the terms of the contracts? Who benefits? What damage is being done to the environment? What protections exist for workers? These questions remain unanswered, he said. The documentary concluded that while China's projects may technically stay within the law, the lack of openness leaves an unmistakable shadow hanging over them. In eastern Serbia, the Bor copper mine, now run by a Chinese company, has sparked outrage. Locals complain that constant blasting has cracked the walls of their homes and poisoned the surrounding environment. In Zrenjanin, the site of the Shandong Linglong tire factory, conditions were even more shocking. Vietnamese workers were reportedly crammed into overcrowded dormitories with no running water or electricity. Meanwhile, in neighboring Montenegro, a highway project led by a Chinese construction giant drove the small nation of barely 600,000 people into $1 billion of debt. The completed section stretched only a third of the intended route, yet loan documents revealed that if Montenegro defaulted, Beijing reserved the right to seize assets. Most other details of the deal remain sealed, fueling suspicion. Critics argue that China thrives on working with corrupt governments, while Chinese state media continues to insist the Belt and Road brings prosperity to Central and Eastern Europe. Since 2013, The Balkans have seen 136 China-backed projects worth over $32 billion, many tainted by corruption, labor abuse, and environmental damage. Serbia has become Beijing's main partner, with over 30 joint ventures and record trade of $8.3 billion last year. But heavy debts from Belt and Road deals raise fears that Serbia could face a crisis similar to Sri Lanka or Pakistan, threatening its independence and fueling public distrust of government policy. Looking ahead, Serbia's political future remains uncertain. If student protests intensify, corruption scandals continue to spread, and pressure from Brussels grows stronger. President Aleksandar Vučić could be forced out. Should that happen, a new government might pivot away from Beijing, review existing deals, and limit further cooperation. Serbia's economy is already closely tied to the EU, and culturally, it shares more with Europe and Russia than with China. If Belgrade leans harder toward Brussels and accelerates its EU accession, China's attempt to anchor itself in the Balkans could unravel. In that case, Serbia's withdrawal from the Belt and Road Initiative might be just a matter of time.